I stood in my daughter's kitchen doorway, my car packed with overnight bags and a heart full of hope. 63 years old, and I still felt that flutter of nervous excitement before seeing my children. The same feeling I'd had when they were little and I was planning their birthday parties, baking their favorite cakes, making sure everything was perfect. But this time the nervous flutter turned into something else entirely. Something colder. "Mom!" Sarah's voice came from the living room, somewhere between confused and irritated. "Your birthday was last week. Why are you here?" I froze. I can still see the expression on her face, that mixture of annoyance and mild embarrassment, as if I'd shown up at an inconvenient time at a party I wasn't invited to. Not anger. Not upset. Just inconvenienced. Like I was a piece of their carefully organized life that didn't fit into their schedule. 63 years I'd been on this earth. 34 of those years I'd spent raising Sarah and her brother Michael, working 2 jobs so they could have piano lessons and summer camps, buying their school clothes while I wore the same 3 outfits to work. 34 years of showing up, literally and figuratively, for every recital, every graduation, every moment that mattered to them. And now I was being asked why I'd shown up for my own birthday. What happened next wasn't what any of them expected. What happened next was the beginning of something I wish I'd done years before. It was the moment I finally decided that if my own family wasn't going to celebrate my life, then by God I would do it myself. And I'd do it in a way they would never forget. Let me back up. Let me tell you who I am and who I've been for the past 3 decades, because you need to understand what I'd already sacrificed by the time I knocked on Sarah's door with a suitcase and expectations. My name is Alice, and I was a teacher for 37 years. That's what I've always been most proud of. Not just the job itself, but what that job meant. I stood in front of hundreds of children over the decades, teaching them history and literature, and more importantly, teaching them that they mattered. That their stories mattered. That the choices they made would ripple into the future in ways they couldn't predict. I was good at it too. My classroom was the one where students actually wanted to be. I had a coffee pot in the corner and a couch in the back where kids who were having bad days could sit. I knew which students were going home to empty houses, and which ones needed an extra sandwich from my lunchbox. I wasn't just teaching them content. I was teaching them that someone saw them, that someone cared. But the thing about being that person, the person who's always there, who's always the one showing up, who's always the one putting in the extra effort, is that it becomes your identity. It becomes who people expect you to be. And if you're not careful, it becomes who you forget you are outside of that role. When I retired at 62, I thought my children would celebrate me. I thought my sacrifice and my service would have meant something to them. I thought that maybe finally I'd get to be on the receiving end of that care and attention. I was naive. My ex-husband David and I divorced when the children were young. I won't go into all the details, I never do. What matters is that I chose to stay present in my children's lives in a way many single parents struggle to do. I was there. Always there. Even when David was difficult about child support, even when he missed his scheduled weekends, even when I had to pick up extra shifts to afford their school fees. I was there. Sarah, my daughter, was the easier one growing up. Michael, my son, has always been more independent, more distant. But Sarah was my girl. She was born 7 weeks early, and I spent the first 3 months of her life in the NICU with her, sleeping in those uncomfortable chairs that fold into nothing, pumping breast milk every 2 hours, singing to her through the plastic of her incubator. She was tiny and fierce even then, fighting to breathe on her own, fighting to grow. I transferred that intensity of care into her entire childhood. I went to every school event. I helped her with her science projects. I picked her up from soccer practice and drove Michael to his baseball games, and I made dinner for both of them even though I'd worked an 8-hour day on my feet. I helped her through middle school drama, high school heartbreak, her first breakup with a boyfriend named James who, in hindsight, was completely wrong for her anyway. When she went to college, I helped her move into her dorm. When she got her first job in marketing at a tech company 40 minutes away, I drove out to meet her for lunch on my lunch breaks. When she bought her house 3 years ago with her new husband Robert, I spent an entire weekend helping her paint the living room and set up her kitchen. I did all of this because I loved her. But I also did it because somewhere along the way, being needed became something I couldn't live without. Then I retired. The teaching career I'd poured my heart into for 37 years ended, and suddenly I had all this free time. All this love and energy and presence that used to be distributed among my students and my children, and nowhere to put it. I thought this would make me closer to Sarah and Michael. I thought they would appreciate having their mother around more. I thought we'd go to lunches and movies and get coffee together and rebuild something that the busy years of raising and working had worn thin. Instead, I found myself calling and texting and getting short replies. Instead, I found myself driving out to their houses unannounced, which they hated, or waiting for invitations that came fewer and farther between. Instead, I found myself becoming background noise in their lives, a person to call when they needed something but not someone they actually wanted to spend time with. I tried to adjust. I took up hobbies. I volunteered at the local library. I joined a book club and a hiking group and a pottery class. But there's something about being a mother that makes all other identities feel somehow lesser, somehow not quite enough. So when my birthday rolled around in late October, I made a decision. I called Sarah and told her I was driving up for the weekend. I didn't ask. I told her, like I used to do when she was a child and I'd announce that we were going for ice cream or to the park. "Mom," she'd said over the phone, her voice carefully neutral. "Robert and I have plans this weekend." "I know," I said. "I'm planning to spend Saturday with you." "Saturday is my birthday." There was a pause. Then, "Mom, we can't really, we're supposed to go to this thing. It's pretty important." "Your mother's birthday isn't important?" I asked, and I can hear now how that sounded. Passive-aggressive and guilt-ridden and desperate all at once. She sighed. "That's not fair. You know I love you. But we literally have this event we can't miss. Can we do something next weekend? Or maybe you could come for a weekday dinner." A weekday dinner. Like something she could squeeze in between work and her real life. But I didn't argue. I didn't want to be the nagging mother. I didn't want to be difficult. So I said, "Of course, honey. Whatever works for you." And I sounded like I meant it. What happened next is the part I'm ashamed of. Not because I did anything wrong, but because it took me so long to do it. I called Sarah back the next day. "I'm coming up on Friday night instead," I said. "I'll stay with you Friday, leave Sunday morning. That way I'm not interfering with your Saturday plans." Sarah was quiet for a moment, and I could hear in that quiet all the things she wasn't saying. The frustration at my persistence. The resigned acceptance that she was going to have to deal with this with me and it was going to be annoying. "Okay, Mom," she said. "Friday through Sunday is fine. But I can't promise we'll be doing anything big. It's really not a big deal, your birthday. It's not a big deal." Those words stayed with me the entire drive up to her house. 3.5 hours of highway and my own thoughts, and they stayed with me. It's not a big deal. I'd given birth to this woman. 48 hours of labor, a cesarean section, a recovery that lasted weeks. I'd fed her from my body, walked her through colic and teething and childhood illnesses. I'd taught her to ride a bike in our driveway, holding the back seat, running alongside her, finally letting go, watching her fly forward. I'd been her biggest cheerleader through every accomplishment, her safe place through every crisis. And to her, my birthday was not a big deal. Now I need to be fair here. I need to tell you about Sarah's life, about who she'd become, because the story isn't just about her dismissiveness. The story is about how we let our relationships calcify into these hardened patterns where no one is quite happy, and no one knows how to change it. Sarah had become a different person than the girl I'd known. She'd become very successful, very ambitious, very focused on the external markers of achievement that our society tells women they should care about. She had the job, the house, the handsome husband, the Instagram perfect life where everything looked curated and beautiful and carefully arranged. But underneath all of that, I could see my daughter drowning. She was stressed constantly. She complained about the house being too expensive, about work being demanding, about not having time for anything. She talked about needing to work out more and sleep better and see her friends more. But she never actually did any of those things. She was stuck on this hamster wheel of productivity and achievement, and she genuinely seemed to have forgotten that there was any other way to live. The irony was that I tried to teach her something different. I tried to model a different kind of life, one where the people in your life mattered more than the things you owned, where showing up was more important than being perfect. But somewhere between my teaching and her living, she decided I was wrong. When I arrived at her house on Friday evening, she greeted me at the door with a perfunctory hug. She smelled like lavender shampoo and she felt thin under my arms, too thin. She was wearing workout clothes that were still damp with sweat. "I just got back from a spin class," she said, leading me inside. "I need to take a shower. Robert's working late. There's leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry." Leftovers? On my birthday? I didn't say anything. I unpacked my bag in the guest room. Yes, there was a guest room in their house, and I'd suggested the furniture and the curtains and the paint color, and they still treated me like I was visiting from a hotel chain. I set my things down carefully, and I sat on the edge of the bed, and I let myself feel the full weight of my sadness. I was 63 years old. I'd worked my entire adult life. I'd raised 2 children on a teacher's salary. I'd sacrificed things I still thought about sometimes, opportunities for travel, for relationships, for just living without the constant low-grade anxiety of making sure everyone else was okay. And none of it had meant anything to them. They'd taken it as their due. When Sarah came downstairs an hour later, showered and dressed in the kind of comfortable clothes that still looked expensive, she tried to compensate for the earlier coldness. "I'm sorry I have this thing tomorrow," she said. "But we could do dinner tonight. Or breakfast tomorrow before the event if you want." "What is the event?" I asked. "Oh, it's just this work networking thing. Robert's company is sponsoring it, and I'm supposed to help. It's really boring, honestly. The kind of thing where you stand around and drink wine and talk about quarterly reports." She made a face. "You're not missing anything exciting." "It sounds like something you could skip," I said carefully. "Mom." She said my name like I'd said something unreasonable, like I didn't understand how the real world worked. "I can't skip it. These things matter for Robert's career. And honestly, I like the company I work with. I should probably go. It's important to show face." To show face. Not because she wanted to go, not because she cared, but because it was important to show face. That's when I understood something crucial about my daughter that I'd been avoiding. Sarah didn't actually know me. And more importantly, I didn't think she actually knew herself either. We had dinner, takeout Thai food that we picked up because neither of us felt like cooking. We ate it on her expensive marble countertops, and we talked about safe things. The weather. A book I'd read. A Netflix show she'd watched. Not about her life or my life or us. Just safe, surface-level things that required no real connection. When Robert came home, he gave me a warm hug. He's always been good about that. And he asked about my drive and how I was doing. He meant it, I think. Robert is a good man. But he's also very busy, and it was clear he had work to do, so after 20 minutes of pleasantries, he excused himself and went to his home office. Sarah and I watched television together for a while, and then she yawned and said she had to be up early. "Of course," I said. "You get some sleep. Don't worry about me." "Are you sure?" she asked, and I could tell she was relieved that I was being easy about this, that I wasn't going to make her feel guilty. "I'm sure," I said. "I'm happy just to be here." I was lying. I wasn't happy. I was angry. I was heartbroken. I was beginning to understand something that would take the rest of the weekend to fully crystallize. I was beginning to understand that I had spent my entire life making my own needs disappear for other people's comfort, and they'd gotten so used to me doing that, they couldn't even see me anymore. Saturday morning I woke up early. The house was quiet. Through the window of the guest room, I could see the sun rising over the neighborhood. One of those perfect fall mornings where the light is golden, and the air is crisp and everything feels full of possibility. I thought about going for a walk. I thought about making myself breakfast in their kitchen. I thought about calling Sarah and reminding her that it was my birthday, that maybe she should take 5 minutes to acknowledge that, at least. Instead, I did something I'd never done before. I got out my phone and I started making some calls. The first call was to my friend Margaret, who I'd met in the book club. Margaret was 6 years older than me, recently widowed, and she had a way of seeing through people's bullshit that I deeply respected. "Are you busy today?" I asked. "Absolutely not," Margaret said. "What's going on?" I told her. I told her everything. About arriving at Sarah's house to find out that my birthday was not a big deal, about the leftovers and the spin class and the networking event that was more important than her mother's birthday. And as I was telling her, I realized how pathetic I sounded, how desperate and sad and needy. "So," Margaret said when I finished. "So what?" I asked. "So what are you going to do about it?" That was the question, wasn't it? What was I going to do? I could get angry. I could make a scene. I could guilt-trip Sarah about how ungrateful she was being, about how I'd sacrificed everything for her. I could make her feel bad and she would probably apologize and we'd have a dramatic mother-daughter moment and then we'd go back to exactly how things were. Or I could do something else entirely. Can you meet me in the city? I asked Margaret. Say an hour? Absolutely, she said. Where? I gave her the address of a restaurant I'd been wanting to try for months. The kind of place where you need a reservation weeks in advance, where they have a dress code and a wine list that took 15 minutes to read. The kind of place that was expensive and beautiful and felt like celebrating something that mattered. I'll see you in an hour, Margaret said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. I got up and took a long shower. I used my good shampoo, the expensive one I usually save for special occasions, and I shaved my legs carefully. I dried my hair and gave myself a manicure using the nail polish I'd bought before the trip. And then I put on the dress I'd packed. It was a gorgeous emerald green wrap dress that I'd bought 3 months earlier, but had been too nervous to wear anywhere. It made me feel beautiful. It made me feel like the version of myself that existed before I became someone's daughter or someone's mother or someone's teacher. It made me feel like a woman who was allowed to take up space in the world. Sarah was in the kitchen when I came downstairs, getting coffee before heading out to her event. Wow, she said, and for the first time in a long time she actually looked at me. Really looked at me. You look really nice, Mom. Are you going out? Yes, I said. I didn't offer any other information. I let her wonder. Oh, are you meeting a friend? That's nice. She was back on her phone before I even answered. I'll probably be back around 5 or 6. There's that Thai food left over if you want it. I have plans, I said. Okay, have fun. And she was already walking away, already thinking about her work event, already forgetting I was there. Margaret was waiting outside the restaurant when I pulled up. She was wearing a purple dress and she had her hair done, and she looked like a woman who had something to prove, which I suppose we both did. Happy birthday, she said, hugging me fiercely. Let's go celebrate a woman who clearly deserves to be celebrated. The restaurant was beautiful. Everything about it was beautiful. The lighting was soft and golden. The tables were far enough apart that you felt like you were having a private conversation, even though there were dozens of other people in the room. The staff was attentive but not intrusive. The wine was excellent. The food was extraordinary, the kind of food that made you slow down and actually taste it instead of just eating it because you had to. And I told Margaret everything. I told her about the past 30 years. I told her about the sacrifices and the choices I'd made and the person I'd tried to be. I told her about standing in front of classrooms for decades, teaching other people's children because my own children didn't seem to need me anymore. I told her about the loneliness of being a mother who'd done everything right, and somehow ended up completely invisible. You know what you did? Margaret asked me over dessert. What? I said. You loved them so much that you forgot to love yourself. And they got so used to being loved like that, so unconditionally, so completely, that they stopped thinking you mattered as a person. You made yourself background radiation in their lives. How do I fix that? I asked. You don't fix it, Margaret said. You change it. You stop making yourself disappear. You start treating your own life like it matters. Because it does, Alice. It matters so much. We stayed at the restaurant for 3 hours. We ordered another bottle of wine. We had coffee and dessert and after-dinner drinks. We laughed about things that weren't even funny because we were 2 women celebrating the fact that we were still alive, still here, still capable of joy. When I got back to Sarah's house, it was almost 7 o'clock. The sun was setting, and her car was in the driveway. I could see lights on in the living room. I sat in my car for a moment, just breathing, feeling the difference between the woman I'd been that morning and the woman I was now. I walked inside and Sarah was on the couch with Robert, and they had wine and cheese laid out on the coffee table. Mom, Sarah said, and for once she actually sounded happy to see me. I'm so glad you're back. I have a surprise for you. I stood in the doorway for a moment, looking at my daughter, trying to read what this meant. Was she apologizing? Had she realized that she'd been dismissive and unkind? Or was this something else, some last-minute salvage operation, a way to smooth things over without actually changing anything? We were thinking, Sarah said, gesturing to Robert, that we should do something for your birthday tomorrow, Sunday before you leave. Just the 3 of us. Maybe we could go to that brunch place you like? The one with the mimosas. I felt something crystallize inside me, because I understood suddenly what was happening. Sarah hadn't forgotten about my birthday. She just deprioritized it. And now that I was back, now that she could see me, she was trying to make up for it by offering me the crumbs of her attention. A brunch, a few hours of her time, some mimosas. It was exactly what I would have accepted 3 weeks ago. It was exactly what I would have been grateful for, even though I deserved so much more. But I wasn't that woman anymore. That's very sweet of you, I said carefully. But I actually have plans for tomorrow. Sarah looked confused. Plans? What plans? Margaret and I are going to go hiking, I said. I've been looking forward to it. And then I'm meeting with a couple other people from my hiking group for dinner. This wasn't true. But it was the kind of not true that felt absolutely necessary. Oh, Sarah said. She looked genuinely confused, like she'd calculated that I had no life outside of my availability to her. And the math wasn't adding up. Well, when will you have time for brunch? Maybe next time I visit, I said. And I wasn't making a promise. I was stating a fact that was also a boundary. Next time you visit? Sarah's voice had changed. She sounded panicked now, like she could sense something shifting. Mom, are you upset with me? Here was the moment where I could have taken the easy route. I could have told her I wasn't upset, that everything was fine, that she was right to prioritize her event in her life. I could have told her I understood, that I was just being sensitive, that I'd overreacted. I could have made her comfortable. But I'd spent 63 years making other people comfortable. And I was exhausted. Yes, I said. I'm upset with you. I'm upset that I drove 3.5 hours on my birthday to see my daughter. And I was treated like an inconvenience. I'm upset that you forgot that my birthday was important to me before you even forgot that I was here. I'm upset that you have enough time to go to a networking event, but not enough time to acknowledge that your mother exists and deserves to be celebrated. Sarah's face went through several different expressions very quickly. First shock, then defensiveness, then something that looked like shame. Mom, that's not fair, she started. It's not fair. I could feel something rising in my chest, something I'd been suppressing for years. Do you know what's not fair? It's not fair that I worked 2 jobs so you could take piano lessons. It's not fair that I helped you through every crisis of your life, while maintaining a career that actually required something from me. It's not fair that I showed up for you over and over and over again, and the one time I asked you to show up for me, I was an inconvenience. I didn't say you were an inconvenience, Sarah said. You didn't have to say it, I interrupted. You showed it. Your entire response showed it. You know what my birthday means to me? It doesn't mean a fancy dinner or an expensive gift. It means that the people I love actually remember that I'm a person. It means that my existence matters to them as much as it matters to me. Robert was staring at his shoes. He knew this wasn't his fight. I'm sorry, Sarah said quietly. You're right. I've been selfish. I got caught up in my own stuff and I wasn't thinking about you. And here's the thing about apologies. Sometimes they fix things, and sometimes they're just words that make you feel better without actually changing anything. Sometimes an apology is a substitute for actually behaving differently. I know, I said. But sorry isn't enough anymore, Sarah. I've heard a lot of sorries over the years. I don't need another sorry. I need to see you change. Sarah looked up at me, and there were tears in her eyes. What do you want me to do? That was a good question. And for the first time in a long time, I actually had to think about it. What did I want? What would actually make a difference? I want you to understand that I have my own life, I said. I want you to stop treating me like I exist only in relation to you. I want you to call me sometimes just to talk, not because you need something. I want you to remember my birthday before I remind you. But most importantly, I want you to understand that the way you've been treating me is not okay. I understand, Sarah said. I'll do better. I promise. And I believed her. I did. But I also knew that promises are easy and change is hard. I also knew that if I immediately went back to being available and forgiving and understanding, we'd be right back where we started in 3 months or 6 months or a year. That's when I decided what I really needed to do. I excused myself and went upstairs to the guest room. I pulled out my suitcase and I started packing, not slowly and carefully like I'd unpacked, but deliberately, efficiently. I was leaving. When I came back downstairs, Sarah was waiting for me. "What are you doing?" she asked. "I'm going home," I said. "Now? It's Saturday night. You were supposed to stay until tomorrow." "I know," I said. "But I don't want to stay anymore. I don't want the brunch tomorrow. I don't want you to try to make this better right now. What I want is for you to sit with this feeling for a while. I want you to understand what it feels like to be disappointed by someone you love. And I want us to figure out a different kind of relationship, one where I'm not always the one giving and you're not always the one taking." "Mom, don't do this," Sarah said. "Don't leave angry." "I'm not leaving angry," I said. And I realized as I said it that it was true. I wasn't angry anymore. I was sad and I was disappointed, but I wasn't angry. I'm leaving because I respect myself enough to leave. I'm leaving because staying would be reinforcing the idea that my needs don't matter. I'm leaving because I need to show my daughter by example what self-love looks like. The drive home was 3.5 hours of highway and falling darkness. And for the first time in those 3.5 hours, I didn't feel guilty. I didn't feel like I'd done something wrong. I felt like I'd finally done something right. When I got home to my apartment, I made myself tea and I called Margaret. "How'd it go?" she asked. "I left," I said. "I packed my bag and I left in the middle of the evening." "Good," Margaret said, and she didn't sound surprised. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying," I said. "And liberating. Mostly terrifying." "That's normal," she said. "You just told someone you love that they can't treat you like a doormat anymore. That's scary. That's also necessary." Over the next few days, my phone rang several times. Sarah called. Michael called. They left messages saying they were sorry, that they hadn't realized how much they'd hurt me, that they wanted to make it right. Each time I listened to their messages, I felt a little less like the old version of me who would have called them back immediately, apologizing for my own anger, trying to smooth things over. But I didn't call back right away. I took my time, because I'd realized something crucial. I'd spent so long trying to be what other people needed me to be that I had no idea who I actually was. And if I was going to have real relationships with my children, it had to start from a place where I knew myself first. So I started making plans. Real plans. Plans that didn't revolve around my children's schedules or my family's needs. Plans that were just about me. I called Margaret and we signed up for a painting class. I'd always wanted to paint, and I'd never done it because there were always more important things to do. Now there weren't. I joined a book club that actually met in person instead of just existing as a group chat where people sent emoji reactions to each other's posts. I signed up for a trip to Italy that I've been dreaming about for 20 years. And here's the thing I think is really important for anyone listening to understand: it wasn't selfish. It wasn't cruel or punitive or designed to hurt my children. It was necessary. It was the thing I had to do to figure out who I was when I wasn't being someone's mother or someone's daughter or someone's caretaker. It was the thing I had to do to become whole again. About 2 weeks after I left Sarah's house, I got a visit. Sarah and Robert showed up at my apartment on a Saturday morning with coffee and a bakery box full of pastries. She looked nervous, like she wasn't sure if she was welcome. "I wanted to talk," she said. "Can we sit down?" We sat at my kitchen table, the small kitchen table in my small apartment that I'd chosen just for me, and Sarah started crying. "I've been thinking about what you said," she told me. "And I've been thinking about how I've been treating you. And I've been thinking about how much you did for me when I was growing up, and how I've just forgotten about you. Like you were just a utility, just the person who showed up when I needed something." "Yes," I said simply. I didn't soften it. I didn't try to make her feel better about it. "I'm so sorry," she said. "I'm so sorry." "I know," I said. "But apologies without change are just words. I need to see you actually treat me differently." And something shifted in that moment. Sarah nodded, and she didn't argue. She didn't try to defend herself or explain away her behavior. She just accepted what I was saying and she said, "Tell me what that looks like." So I did. I told her what I needed. I told her I needed her to call me once a week just to check in. Not because something was wrong, but because she wanted to know how my week was going. I told her I needed her to plan things in advance with me instead of fitting me in last minute. I told her I needed her to ask me questions about my life and actually listen to the answers. I told her I needed her to understand that loving someone means considering their needs sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes. And she said yes. Now, I won't tell you that everything was fixed after that. It wasn't. Change takes time. But what happened was that Sarah started actually seeing me as a person instead of just as her mother. And as I started building a life that didn't revolve around them, I had more to talk about. I had stories about my painting class and my book club. I had photos from my Italy trip. I had a life that was interesting and full and rich. And my children started wanting to be part of that life. Michael actually called me one day and asked if I would teach him how to paint, because he'd seen some of my work and thought it was beautiful. Sarah started asking for recommendations for books. They started introducing me to their friends as my mother, who's an incredible artist instead of just my mother. But here's the other thing that happened. And this is the part one want to emphasize because I think it's important. My birthday changed. Changed completely. Because I decided that I wasn't going to wait for my family to celebrate it. I was going to celebrate it myself. My next birthday came around and I planned a party. I invited Margaret and the people from my book club and my hiking group. I invited Michael and Sarah, but I didn't center the party around them. I didn't treat it like if they showed up it would be a success and if they didn't it would be a failure. I treated it like it was my party, and I was going to have a good time whether they came or not. Michael came. Sarah came too, and she brought homemade cupcakes because she remembered that I love good cupcakes. Robert came and he brought wine. And you know what the best part was? They were genuinely happy to be there. Not obligated. Not guilty. Actually happy. And I was happy too. Not because my family finally showed up for me, although that was nice. But because I'd stopped needing them to show up for me in order for my life to have value. But the real turning point, the thing that made everything crystal clear, came about 6 months after my birthday disaster at Sarah's house. If you're looking to bring more purpose into your everyday moments, consider how changing one relationship can transform your entire perspective. It's worth remembering as you explore the stories we're sharing here. By the way, if you're enjoying following Alice's journey, I'd encourage you to subscribe to stay connected with more transformative stories like this one. I got a call from David, my ex-husband. David and I hadn't been close since the divorce. We'd been civil for the kids' sake, but there was always this undercurrent of disappointment and resentment. He'd remarried about 15 years ago to a woman named Connolly, who was very elegant and very remote. I'd never felt particularly close to her, but I'd always been cordial. Alice, David said when I answered. His voice sounded different than I remembered, older maybe, more tired. Hello David, I said. How are you? I've been thinking, he said. Actually, I've been thinking about something for a while. And I realized that I owe you an apology. I wasn't sure what to say to that. An apology for what? For the divorce? For the custody disputes? For missing his scheduled weekends with the kids? For all the ways he'd made my life harder when I was just trying to do the best I could? I've been watching you, he continued. I see things on Facebook. Sarah posts about you sometimes. And I see how you're building this life for yourself. And I realized something. I realized that you were always the strong one. You were always the one who showed up. And I think I took advantage of that. I think we both did, me and the kids. We took for granted that you would always be there. That you would always sacrifice, that your needs would always come last. I felt something crack open in my chest. An old wound that I'd thought had healed a long time ago. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I'm old, he said simply. And I'm not going to be around forever. And I want you to know before I'm gone that I see you. I see what you did. I see the sacrifice. And I'm sorry that it took me this long to appreciate it. We talked for almost an hour that day. About the marriage and why it failed. About the children and how we'd both loved them imperfectly but with all our hearts. About the person I was becoming and how he was proud of me for it. When we hung up I cried. Not the sad kind of crying, but the kind of crying that comes from finally being seen by someone who should have seen you all along. The next week I organized a family dinner. Just the 5 of us, me, Sarah, Michael, Robert, and Michael's girlfriend Jessica. I cooked the meal myself in my small apartment kitchen, using recipes I'd been wanting to try. I made roasted chicken with lemon and herbs, roasted vegetables, fresh bread that I'd made from scratch, a salad with a good vinaigrette. Before we sat down to eat I said, I want to tell you something. I want to tell you about something I realized over the past few months. Everyone looked at me expectantly. I spent most of my life thinking that being a good mother, a good person meant always being available, I said. Always putting other people first. Always making sure everyone else's needs were taken care of before my own. And I think in some ways that was a good thing. But in other ways I think I did you a disservice. I think I taught you that it was okay to make me small. That it was okay to take me for granted. And I'm sorry for that. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. Michael looked uncomfortable but attentive. But here's what I learned, I continued. I learned that the best thing I can do for you is to take care of myself. Because when I'm not taking care of myself, I'm not actually available to you. I'm just exhausted and resentful and bitter. And that's not what you want from your mother. And it's not what I want to give you. Mom, Michael said, you don't have to apologize. You did an amazing job raising us. I know I did, I said. But I also know that I could have done it in a way that didn't cost me so much. And if you have kids someday, either of you, I hope you'll think about that. I hope you'll figure out how to be a good parent without losing yourself completely. We had dinner and we talked. Not about surface-level things like weather and Netflix, but about real things. About our fears and our dreams and the ways we were disappointed in ourselves and each other. It wasn't comfortable exactly, but it was honest. And I think honest is better than comfortable. After dinner, Sarah helped me clean up. I want to throw you a party, she said. For your birthday. I want to actually plan something meaningful, something that I put thought into. Something that celebrates you, not just the role you play in my life, but you as a person. Will you let me do that? I looked at my daughter, and I saw for the first time in years that she actually understood what I was asking for. She understood that I needed to be seen. I would like that, I said. My birthday party, the one that Sarah threw for me 3 weeks later, was nothing like the party she used to have. She didn't hire a caterer or rent a venue. She didn't try to make it fancy or Instagram-worthy. Instead, she created something meaningful. She invited all the people who mattered to me, Margaret and the hiking group and the people from my book club. She invited Michael and Jessica. She made decorations using photos from my life over the past year. Pictures of me painting, pictures of me in Italy, pictures of me happy. And she created a video. She'd called all my former students, every single one that she could track down. And she'd asked them to record a message telling me what I'd meant to them in my classroom. She played that video during the party, and I sat there crying while dozens and dozens of young people talked about how I changed their lives, how I'd been there for them when no one else was, how I taught them that they mattered. That was the moment I understood the difference between being needed and being valued. For so long I'd confused the two. I thought that if people needed me, that meant I mattered. But what I learned was that you matter not because people depend on you, but because you make a difference in their lives. My family wasn't depending on me anymore. But I'd made a difference. And they were finally starting to see it. After the party, Sarah pulled me aside. I want you to know something, she said. I want you to know that I'm going to make some changes. I'm talking to Robert about maybe cutting back my hours at work. We're thinking about trying for a baby. And I realized that I don't want to be this stressed all the time. I don't want to be on that hamster wheel. And I think you showed me that. By taking care of yourself, by stepping back, you showed me that there's another way to live. I didn't know what to say to that. That my stepping back, my taking myself seriously, had inspired her to reconsider the trajectory of her own life? That the best thing I could do for my children was to refuse to let them take me for granted? I'm proud of you, I said, and I meant it. The thing about family relationships is that they're not like other relationships. You can't just walk away from your family. They're woven into your identity, into your history, into the very fabric of who you are. But what you can do is change the nature of that relationship. You can set boundaries. You can demand to be treated with respect. You can refuse to be invisible. That's what I did. I'm 65 years old now. It's been 2 years since the birthday that wasn't really a birthday. 2 years since I decided that my life mattered enough to center it around myself instead of around other people's needs. Sarah and Robert did try for a baby. They had a daughter, little Emma, 8 months ago. And they've asked me to be involved, not in an exhausting way but in a real way. I babysit 1 day a week, but it's a day I choose. I make time for her because I want to, not because I have to. And Sarah has actually reduced her hours at work. She's happier. She's more present. And I think that's partly because she saw what I did and decided she wanted something different too. Michael got married to Jessica last spring. And at the wedding during his vows he talked about his mother. He talked about how I taught him to work hard and show up and love deeply. And then he talked about how he realized that sometimes the best thing your parent can do for you is to stop sacrificing for you. He talked about how watching me step back and create my own life had shown him what self-respect looked like. I cried during that whole speech. The good kind of crying. David passed away 6 months ago. Cancer. It was sudden, even though he'd been sick for a while and he knew it was coming. Before he died, he told me he was proud of me. He told me I'd done a good job. He told me he was sorry for all the ways he'd made my life harder. And I forgave him not because what he did was okay, but because I understood that we were both just doing the best we could with the tools we had. At his funeral I gave a speech. I talked about the man he was and the father he tried to be and the mistakes he made. I also talked about my own mistakes, about the ways I'd let myself become invisible, about the choices I'd made that I thought were selfless but were really just self-abandonment. What I've learned, I said to that room full of people who barely knew me, is that we teach people how to treat us by how we treat ourselves. If we make ourselves small, people learn that we're small. If we refuse to take up space, people learn that we don't deserve space. But if we love ourselves fiercely and completely, if we demand to be treated with respect, if we build lives that matter to us regardless of whether anyone else thinks they matter, well then people learn something different. They learn that we're worth paying attention to. Life after the birthday disaster has been different. I'm happier, but not in the way I thought happiness would feel when I was younger. I thought happiness would be external. It would come from other people appreciating me, from my family valuing me, from being needed. But actual happiness, the kind that sticks around, comes from the inside. It comes from knowing yourself well enough to set boundaries. It comes from doing things because they matter to you, not because someone else thinks they should. I'm still a mother. I'm still a daughter. But I'm also Alice. I'm also a woman who paints and hikes and reads books and travels and has her own life. And my children are finally starting to know that Alice, instead of just knowing the mother version of me. Last month, Sarah asked me if I was upset about how she treated me that birthday weekend. "Do you still resent me?" she asked. "No," I said, and I meant it. I don't resent you. But I'm also not grateful for you being cruel. What I am is grateful for what came after. I'm grateful that it hurt enough to wake me up. I'm grateful that I finally stopped accepting crumbs and demanded a whole meal. I'm grateful that my pain became my catalyst for change. "Do you think I would have changed if you hadn't left?" Sarah asked. "No," I said honestly. "I don't think you would have. I think you would have kept treating me the same way, and I would have kept accepting it, and we both would have gotten older and more bitter, and eventually we wouldn't have had a relationship at all. Instead, you were forced to actually see me, and you chose to do better. That matters. The choice matters. But here's the thing I really want to say, the thing that I think is the most important part of this entire story. If you're listening to this and you're recognizing yourself in my story, if you're the person who's always been there, who's always sacrificed, who's made yourself small so that other people could be comfortable, I want you to know something. You're not weak for having done that. You're not selfish for finally stopping. You're not ungrateful if you get angry about all the ways you've been taken for granted. You're human. And more importantly, you deserve to have a life that's actually yours. I spent 63 years becoming who everyone else needed me to be. I don't regret that exactly. I loved my children with all of my heart. I was a good teacher. I tried to make the world a little bit better through the choices I made. But I also sacrificed things that I never got back. I sacrificed time. I sacrificed myself. I sacrificed the chance to figure out who I was when I wasn't defined by my relationship to everyone else. If you have time left to you, and hopefully you do, use it. Use it to figure out who you are. Use it to build a life that's yours. Use it to teach the people around you that you matter, that your needs are legitimate, that your existence has value. Because it does. Your life matters. You matter. Not because of what you do for other people, but because you're here. Because you exist. Because you're a person with thoughts and feelings and dreams and desires that are just as valid as anyone else's. My daughter said, "Your birthday was last week. Why are you here?" And I found the answer to that question. I was here because I deserved to be here. I was here because my birthday was important to me. I was here because my life was worth celebrating. even if no one else was going to do the celebrating. So I did it myself. And that, I think, is the most important celebration of all.